The spiritual battle over Edgar Lungu's body, what Zambia isn't being told. This is not just a legal dispute. And it may not even be just political. Across Zambia, whispers have followed the battle over Edgar Chagwa Lungu's body, whispers of prophecy, spiritual authority, ancestral tradition, and unfinished covenants. Why has this burial become so contested? Why has emotion outweighed procedure? And why do religious leaders, prophets, and political actors all seem drawn into the same moment? Tonight, we explore the spiritual narratives shaping this conflict, without superstition, without accusation, but with context. Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of the InspirAfrica Official. I'm Nakash. It's been quite a week here, and I hope you're all doing well as we approach the end of the year. Today, we're diving into something that's been whispered about in corners, discussed in hushed tones, but rarely brought into the full light of public scrutiny, our lead story today. The spiritual battle over Edgar Lungu's body, what Zambia isn't being told. Picture this: a former president of the Republic of Zambia, a man who once held the highest office in the land, now finds himself at the center of a storm that transcends politics and enters the realm of the spiritual. Imagine the corridors of power where decisions about nations are made, now allegedly infiltrated by forces that operate in shadows, forces that deal not in policy papers but in rituals, in incantations, in the unseen. What happens when those closest to a leader, those who whispered in his ear, who guided his decisions, who stood by his side, are accused of something far more sinister than political maneuvering? What if the very body of Edgar Lungu, the physical vessel of Zambia's sixth president, has become a battleground? A prize fought over not by opposing parties, but by spiritual practitioners claiming ownership, claiming influence, claiming power over his very essence? How did we arrive at a moment where allegations of juju, witchcraft, and spiritual manipulation dominate the conversation around a former head of state? Who stands to gain from keeping Edgar Lungu bound, not by political legacy, but by supernatural chains? And most troublingly, if these allegations hold even a fragment of truth, what does it say about the vulnerability of our leaders, the integrity of our institutions, and the invisible forces that may have shaped Zambia's recent history? What happens when the battle for a nation's soul is fought not in parliament, but in the spiritual realm? And why isn't Zambia being told the full story? Factual foundation, background and timeline. The revelation came to light through a series of explosive claims that began circulating in religious circles and on social media platforms throughout late 2024 and into early 2025. At the center of these allegations is Archbishop Emmanuel Mutumwa, a controversial religious figure who has positioned himself as a spiritual warrior determined to expose what he calls the demonic strongholds over Zambia's leadership. Archbishop Mutumwa first made headlines in November 2024 when he held a press conference in Lusaka, announcing that he had received divine revelation about the spiritual state of former President Edgar Lungu. According to Mutumwa, Lungu had been subjected to intense spiritual manipulation during his tenure as president, manipulation orchestrated by individuals within his inner circle who practiced what the archbishop termed high-level witchcraft. The initial claims seemed almost too sensational to be taken seriously. But as weeks passed, Mutumwa doubled down, providing what he claimed were testimonies from former practitioners, leaked recordings, and detailed accounts of rituals allegedly performed at State House and other government facilities between 2015 and 2021. By December 2024, the story had evolved from fringe conspiracy theory to a topic of national debate. Opposition politicians began referencing the allegations in campaign speeches. Civil society organizations called for investigations. And most significantly, religious leaders across denominational lines started weighing in, with some supporting Mutumwa's crusade while others condemned it as dangerous fearmongering. The specific catalyst for the current intensity was a viral video released in January 2025. In it, Archbishop Mutumwa detailed what he described as a spiritual contract that had been placed on Edgar Lungu's body. A contract he claimed was designed to keep the former president under the control of those who had dedicated him to spiritual entities during his presidency. Mutumwa alleged that this contract explained Lungu's political decisions, his health challenges, and even his current legal troubles with the Zambian government. Edgar Lungu himself has remained largely silent on these specific spiritual allegations, though his legal team has issued statements calling them malicious distractions from legitimate political persecution. The Patriotic Front Party, which Lungu led, has been divided in its response. Some members dismissing the claims entirely, while others have quietly acknowledged that spiritual matters were indeed part of the previous administration's operations, though they frame this as routine for African leadership. Direct evidence, quotes and testimony. Let's hear directly from Archbishop Nyatumwa himself, from a recording made during his December 28, 2024 deliverance service. I want to tell Zambia today, and I want to tell the world today, that what we are dealing with is not just politics. No. What we are dealing with is principalities and powers. When I prayed, when I sought the face of God, the Lord showed me. He showed me the former president. And I saw chains. Not physical chains, but spiritual chains wrapped around his body, around his mind, around his destiny. There are people, listen to me carefully, there are people who dedicated that body to powers. They took soil from graveyards, they took items, personal items from the president, and they performed rituals. Why? To control him. To use him. To make sure that even after he leaves office, they still have access to the power, to the influence, to the spiritual authority that came with that office. When pressed by journalists about specifics, Nyatumwa provided this detailed account. I'm not speaking from speculation. I have spoken to 3 former practitioners who were involved. One of them, a woman, she broke down crying when she told me. She said, "Archbishop, we didn't know what we were doing. We were told it was for protection, for success, but we were actually binding him." She told me about ceremonies held at midnight, about how they would take his photographs and speak incantations over them. They buried items in strategic locations around State House. She said to me, "Archbishop, that man's body is not free. Until those things are dug up, until those covenants are broken, he will never be free." A journalist asked, "Are you claiming that President Lungu was aware of these practices?" Nyatumwa responded, "That's the tragedy of it. That's what makes this so diabolical. I believe, and the testimonies suggest, that he may have been told these were just traditional blessings, traditional protection. You know how it works in our culture. Someone tells you, we're just securing your leadership, we're just making sure your enemies don't succeed. But behind that, there's a whole other level operating. A level he may not have fully understood until it was too late." From a leaked audio recording purportedly featuring a conversation between a former State House staff member and an unnamed religious consultant, dated March 2019. The president needs to understand that protection requires sacrifice. We cannot just pray with words alone. The ancestors must be consulted. The spirits of the land must be appeased. If he wants to remain in power, if he wants to overcome his enemies, then certain things must be done. It's not witchcraft. It's African spirituality, it's traditional religion. But it must be done properly, with the right protocols. Response, and he's agreed to this? He doesn't need to know all the details. What matters is that it's done. We have people who know what to do. They've worked with previous leaders. This is how power works in Africa. The West has their own systems, we have ours. Archbishop Nyatumwa also referenced a testimony from what he described as a repentant witch doctor who had worked with government officials. This man, I cannot reveal his name for his own safety, but this man told me, he said, we were given assignments. We were paid well. Sometimes we went to State House at night. We performed cleansings, we performed rituals for favor, for confusion of enemies. But he said something that shook me. He said, Archbishop, every ritual creates a tie. Every ceremony creates a debt. And until that debt is paid, until those ties are cut, the person remains bound. Even if they leave office, even if they try to walk away, they're still connected to whatever was invoked over them. Deeper analysis, implications and reactions. The allegations have forced Zambia into an uncomfortable national conversation about the intersection of traditional spirituality, Christianity, and political power. For a nation that is officially Christian, approximately 85% of the population identifies as such. The suggestion that high-level witchcraft influenced recent governance strikes at fundamental questions of identity and authority. Dr. Chanda Mwenya, a political analyst at the University of Zambia, offered this perspective in a January 2025 interview. What we're seeing is not unique to Zambia. Across Africa, there has always been this dual reality where official state functions operate alongside traditional spiritual practices. The question is never whether these practices exist, they do, and they're deeply embedded in our cultural fabric. The question is, what happens when they intersect with state power? What happens when decisions affecting millions of people are potentially influenced by spiritual consultants operating in the shadows? The Patriotic Front has struggled to present a unified response. Some party officials have categorically denied any involvement in occult practices, calling the allegations a smear campaign designed to further delegitimize Edgar Lungu and the PF brand. Others have taken a more nuanced position. Former PF Secretary General Davies Mwila stated in a radio interview, "Look, in Zambian culture, in African culture generally, we consult traditional healers, we seek spiritual guidance, we perform ceremonies for protection. This doesn't make us devil worshippers. This doesn't make us practitioners of evil. The current government and these religious zealots want to paint everything African as demonic while they embrace Western Christianity as the only legitimate spirituality. It's cultural imperialism, plain and simple." However, this defense has been challenged by Christian leaders who argue there's a clear distinction between cultural practices and what they term covenant with darkness. Bishop Joshua Banda of the Bread of Life Church International argued, "There is a difference between respecting our ancestors and entering into blood covenants with spiritual entities that demand sacrifice and obedience. There is a difference between traditional medicine and witchcraft designed to manipulate and control." What Archbishop Nyatumwa is exposing is not cultural practice, it's spiritual bondage, and it violates both biblical principles and human dignity. The legal implications remain murky. Zambia's laws do not explicitly criminalize witchcraft in the way some Western nations historically did, but there are provisions against harmful traditional practices under customary law. However, prosecuting such cases presents evidentiary nightmares. How does one prove spiritual manipulation in a court of law? What constitutes admissible evidence when the alleged crime operates in an invisible realm? Constitutional lawyer Obvious Mwalateta noted. From a legal standpoint, this is almost impossible to prosecute unless you can demonstrate tangible harm, physical injury, psychological damage, fraud. If someone paid money believing they were receiving spiritual services that were misrepresented, that could be fraud. But proving that rituals were performed, that spiritual contracts exist, that someone's will was compromised by supernatural means? Our legal system isn't equipped for that. Perhaps most troubling are the political implications. If these allegations gain traction, they could be weaponized to delegitimize not just Edgar Lungu but the entire period of his presidency. Every policy decision, every appointment, every executive action could be retroactively questioned. Was this the president's authentic choice, or was he under spiritual influence? Opposition politicians have already begun leveraging this narrative. The United Party for National Development, UPND, currently in power, has been cautious in its official statements, but some members have suggested that the allegations, if true, would explain the erratic governance of the previous administration. Yet there's a dangerous precedent being set. If we accept that political leaders can be spiritually compromised, what prevents similar accusations from being leveled at any leader in the future? Does this create a situation where spiritual accusations become the ultimate political weapon, unfalsifiable, emotionally powerful, and devastating to reputations? Human rights organizations have also raised concerns. Amnesty International's Zambia chapter issued a statement warning against spiritual scapegoating that could lead to persecution of traditional healers and practitioners who operate legitimately within their cultural contexts. And what of Edgar Lungu himself? In the few public appearances he's made since the allegations intensified, he has appeared diminished, withdrawn, a stark contrast to the confident political operator who dominated Zambian politics for 6 years. Is this the result of political defeat and legal pressure, or is there something deeper at play? Those who believe Nitumwa's clean see in Lungu's demeanor evidence of spiritual oppression. Skeptics see a man simply worn down by the weight of corruption charges and political exile. The ambiguity is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this entire saga. We're left with testimonies, allegations, leaked recordings, and dramatic claims, but no definitive proof, no smoking gun, no clear resolution. Just questions that probe at the invisible forces that may or may not shape our reality. Thank you so much for watching today's edition of InspirAfrica Official. This is a story that raises profound questions about power, spirituality, and the hidden forces that may operate behind the scenes of governance, not just in Zambia, but across our continent. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Do you believe spiritual warfare plays a role in African politics? Do you think these allegations against Edgar Lungu hold weight, or are they a dangerous distraction? Have you witnessed or heard of similar practices in your own country? Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your perspective. This conversation is too important to be had in whispers, let's bring it into the light. We'll continue following this story as it develops, and we'll bring you more investigative content that challenges the official narratives and asks the questions others are afraid to pose. Until tomorrow, when we return with another critical story, stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay blessed. I'm Nakash, and this has been InspirAfrica Official.